Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is A Song of Ice and Fire, The Winds of Winter by R.R. Martin. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. The Winds of Winter is the long-awaited sixth book in George R.R. Martin's epic fantasy series, A Song of Ice and Fire. Since the release of A Dance with Dragons in 2011, fans have eagerly awaited the continuation of the sprawling narrative, which weaves together the fates of hundreds of characters across a richly detailed world. The Winds of Winter promises to push the boundaries of political intrigue, magical discovery, and brutal warfare, all while exploring the personal and moral dilemmas of its vast cast. The book comes after the shocking events of A Dance with Dragons, where Martin left readers hanging with numerous cliffhangers. The North is in disarray, with Jon Snow at the center of a fragile leadership, while Daenerys Targaryen's dragons continue to grow in strength. Meanwhile, the power struggle in Westeros intensifies as the Lannisters face increasing pressure from both within and outside the capital. With the Wall under siege and the very realm teetering on the brink of war, The Winds of Winter is poised to escalate the conflicts that have defined the series so far. One of the most intriguing aspects of The Winds of Winter is the increasing role of supernatural elements. Magic, long relegated to the realm of myth and legend, seems to be returning in full force, with characters such as Bran Stark tapping into increasingly powerful abilities, and the mysterious forces surrounding the White Walkers threatening to change the course of the world. The significance of The Winds of Winter goes beyond its role in the larger series. As Martin has hinted, this book will likely be darker, more dangerous, and full of unexpected twists. It is both a continuation and a turning point, one that will have a profound impact on the characters we've followed for years and the world they inhabit. The North is a land in turmoil. As winter spreads its icy fingers across Westeros, the struggle for power, survival, and identity intensifies. At the Wall, Jon Snow stands as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, facing internal strife, treachery, and a daunting responsibility to protect the realm from the looming threat of the White Walkers. His position, fragile from the outset, becomes more precarious with every passing day as the political climate shifts beneath him. The question that haunts Jon is whether he can unite the disparate factions of the Night's Watch, the Wildlings, and the Northern Houses, or if they will all fall to the encroaching darkness from beyond the Wall. Jon's leadership is tested immediately as he attempts to broker a fragile peace between the Night's Watch and the Wildlings. He recognizes the necessity of this alliance, not only for the survival of the people beyond the Wall, but for the protection of Westeros from the growing danger of the White Walkers. But his actions are controversial. His decision to allow the Wildlings to pass through the Wall and his efforts to create a united front spark division among the Night's Watch. His every decision is scrutinized, and enemies are quick to see weakness in his resolve. Jon's struggle is not just with the White Walkers, but with his own brothers, who see his actions as a betrayal of their sacred oaths. These fractures in the Brotherhood set the stage for the brutal consequences of his leadership, and the political maneuvering that follows will set the course for the realm. Meanwhile, far to the south, Daenerys Targaryen, the last of the dragons, faces her own set of challenges. After her dramatic flight from Meereen, she finds herself stranded in a distant land, forced to rely on her wits and the loyalty of her followers to secure her return to power. Daenerys' journey is one of self-discovery and painful transformation. As she grapples with the weight of her destiny, she must navigate a treacherous landscape of shifting alliances and old enemies. Her journey is fraught with danger, but it is clear that she is becoming a ruler in her own right. The Dragon Queen is learning how to balance the fire of her heritage with the cunning required to command a world on the brink of war. Her fate is intertwined with the forces of magic, destiny, and bloodshed that swirl around her, and the choices she makes will have far-reaching consequences for Westeros and the Iron Throne. The political landscape of Westeros itself is a battlefield. In King's Landing, the Lannisters continue to hold sway over the Iron Throne, though their power is slipping. Cersei Lannister, once the queen, now stands in the shadow of the power that her son Tommen holds, but her machinations are far from over. Cersei is a woman whose ambitions and desires know no bounds, and her thirst for vengeance and power is all-consuming. As the storm of war grows ever nearer, she seeks to regain control, plotting with ruthless determination against her enemies. Yet, her actions will inevitably lead to more conflict, and it's clear that her willingness to destroy anyone who stands in her way will ultimately tear her kingdom apart. Across the narrow sea, in the shadow of the Iron Throne's encroaching power, the people of the Riverlands, the Vale, and the North also feel the pull of war. The aftermath of the Red Wedding continues to ripple through the noble houses as the Starks, once proud rulers of the North, struggle to reclaim their lost honor. Arya Stark, in particular, finds herself on a path of vengeance and self-discovery. Her journey has taken her far from her family, yet the pull of her home is never far from her thoughts. As she trains with the mysterious faceless men, Arya begins to learn how to shed her old identity and become something more, something dangerous. The story of Arya is one of transformation, but it is also one of sacrifice. In order to embrace her power, she must let go of the person she once was, and in doing so, she risks losing herself entirely. In the Riverlands, the forces of Robb Stark's rebellion have long since been crushed, but the family's legacy is not so easily erased. The revenge-driven remnants of House Stark are still very much alive, and the survivors of the Red Wedding are finding new ways to make their enemies pay. The political currents in the Riverlands have shifted, with power moving from one faction to another. While the Stark children may be scattered and broken, they are far from defeated. They are still fighting to reclaim what they've lost, even if they must do so from the shadows, and their struggle will resonate across Westeros as the battle for the North rages on. Further south, in the Reach, new players are making their moves. The Tyrells, once loyal to the Lannisters, find themselves caught between the shifting tides of power in Westeros. The blossoming alliance between the Tyrells and the Lannisters is now strained, and the rising tension between the two families threatens to set off another war. The complex dynamics of these noble houses create a volatile mix, one that could change the face of the kingdom. The Tyrells, ever seeking to increase their influence, may soon find themselves at odds with both the Lannisters and other would-be rulers, leading to an unpredictable and dangerous Game of Thrones. In the midst of all this, the White Walkers stir. The growing threat beyond the wall, a shadowy and ancient force, looms ever closer, waiting for the right moment to strike. The arrival of the others, the creatures of legend, is no longer a distant prophecy. They are coming, and their power is unlike anything Westeros has seen before. The stories of winter and death are becoming reality, and it is only a matter of time before their chilling presence makes itself known in full force. The heroes and villains of this world may clash and struggle for dominance, but it is the White Walkers who will be the ultimate test of everything these mortals hold dear. The fate of the realm and the world itself may depend on how these scattered factions come together, or whether they remain divided, leaving them all vulnerable to the encroaching dark. As we begin to unravel the threads of the winds of winter, it's clear that the stakes have never been higher. Whether through alliances, betrayals, or the rising power of ancient forces, each character's path is deeply intertwined with the future of Westeros. The fates of the living and the dead hang in the balance, and the choices made now will ripple through history, shaping the future of the world in ways no one can predict. This is a story of epic proportions, where every decision is weighed in blood, and the outcome is anything but certain. As winter sets its grip on Westeros, the tension between old alliances and new realities deepens. The realm is no longer just a land divided by political strife and bloody ambitions. It has become a place where the line between life and death is razor thin, and the forces of magic and nature collide in a way that threatens to consume everything. The struggle for survival is now as much about the ancient powers that stir beneath the earth as it is about the men and women vying for control of the Iron Throne. And among all this, one truth becomes ever clearer. The cost of power, whether achieved through betrayal or sacrifice, is always steep. At the Wall, Jon Snow faces a future that seems impossible. His leadership has been challenged from all sides, and the weight of command is a burden that grows heavier with each passing day. Though he remains steadfast in his belief that the Night's Watch must unite with the wildlings to confront the true enemy in the north, his actions continue to be viewed as controversial by many of his brothers. Their loyalty to him is divided, with some seeing him as a traitor to their sacred vows, while others understand the grim necessity of his decisions. The most immediate consequence of his choices comes when Jon is betrayed in a most brutal way by those closest to him. As the daggers are driven into his body, Jon is left to bleed out, his life hanging in the balance. Whether this is the end of his journey or merely the beginning of a new chapter remains uncertain. The question now is not only whether Jon can survive, but also whether he can fulfill the destiny that seems to have been thrust upon him, to lead the fight against the forces of darkness gathering beyond the Wall. The death of Jon Snow, if it comes, will leave a vacuum at the heart of the Night's Watch, one that will test the very core of the Brotherhood. Without him, the wildlings may once again be cast aside, their alliance with the Night's Watch shattered, and the looming threat of the White Walkers may grow all the more insurmountable. But if Jon survives, the repercussions of his return will be felt in ways that no one can predict. His near-death experience, his exposure to the darkness that lies beyond the Wall, may change him in profound ways. The magic that runs through the lands of Westeros, an ancient power that is both feared and revered, seems to be pulling him closer to its mysteries. question of whether Jon Snow can truly rise above the simple soldier he once was to become a leader of men, a ruler capable of uniting Westeros in the face of the greatest threat they've ever known, looms large. The key to his survival, as with many in Westeros, may lie not just in his ability to wield a sword, but in his understanding of the old magic that stirs in the world around him. While Jon Snow's fate remains uncertain, far to the south, Daenerys Targaryen's journey continues, and the stakes could not be higher. She has long been a figure of destiny, the Dragon Queen who would reclaim the throne of Westeros for her family. But the road to power is rarely straightforward, and Daenerys must now grapple with the reality that, despite her dragons and the loyalty of her followers, her ascent to the Iron Throne is anything but guaranteed. After the dramatic departure from Meereen, Daenerys finds herself stranded in a distant land, cut off from her base of power, uncertain of what the future holds. The choices she must make now will not only determine her future, but the future of the world she wishes to rule. Daenerys is no longer the wide-eyed girl who first stepped onto the path of power. She has experienced loss, betrayal, and triumph, and these experiences have hardened her. Her dragons, now full-grown and fearsome, are both a blessing and a curse, symbolizing the power that courses through her veins, but also reminding her of the devastating cost of her family's bloodline. As she ventures deeper into foreign lands, surrounded by enemies and allies alike, Daenerys must navigate the treacherous waters of diplomacy and war. Her choices will determine whether she remains the conqueror she wishes to be, or whether the weight of her ambitions will lead to her downfall. Her journey is one of self-discovery and painful transformation, as she struggles to reconcile the ruthless ruler she has become with the compassionate girl she once was. Her struggle is not just one of power, it is a quest for identity, for understanding what kind of leader she truly wants to be. Meanwhile, back in Westeros, Cersei Lannister's hunger for power continues unabated. Now that her children have been lost to her, she is left with nothing but her own ambition and her desire to see the Lannister name ascend once more. Cersei's grip on the Iron Throne has become increasingly tenuous, and her machinations have put her at odds with many of the realm's most powerful families. The Tyrells, once her allies, are now foes, and her strained relationship with her brother Jaime is becoming more complicated by the day. Cersei, ever the survivor, is willing to do anything, betray any ally, destroy any foe to keep her hold on power. Her actions have far-reaching consequences, and as the political landscape shifts, her ambitions will lead to new alliances, dangerous confrontations, and ultimately, more bloodshed. As Cersei plots in King's Landing, the battle for the North is also intensifying. The Starks, though shattered, are not defeated. Bran Stark, whose journey has taken him further than any of his siblings, has begun to tap into the powerful abilities granted by the ancient magic of Westeros. Bran's role in the coming war is one of immense importance, as his ability to see the past, present, and future may hold the key to understanding the true nature of the White Walkers and the powers that threaten to engulf the realm. His path is both a physical and spiritual journey, one that will require him to sacrifice pieces of his humanity in exchange for the knowledge he seeks. And as the various factions of Westeros prepare for the wars to come, the White Walkers continue their relentless march south. The ancient creatures of legend have been stirring in the far north, their presence growing ever more palpable as winter spreads. The Night King, a figure whose motivations are shrouded in mystery, commands the undead armies that threaten to overrun the living. The question on everyone's mind is whether the living can unite in time to stand against this unstoppable force, or if the darkness will engulf them all. The storm is coming, and the winds of winter will shape the future of Westeros in ways no one can predict. Each character, whether on the wall, in King's Landing, or beyond the narrow sea, is caught in the grip of fate, where every choice could alter the course of history. The battle for the Iron Throne may be the central struggle, but the true battle is for survival itself, as the forces of magic and death draw ever closer to the realm. In the end, it may not be a crown that determines who rules Westeros, but the ability to face the darkness that threatens to swallow them all. As the world of Westeros continues to be shaped by powerful forces, both human and supernatural, the lines between heroism and villainy blur in ways that make survival more uncertain than ever. In the East, Daenerys Targaryen has made it clear that she will stop at nothing to claim the Iron Throne, but her journey is not without its complications. Her ambitions are growing, but the path to power is fraught with the realities of war, betrayal, and the complicated dynamics of leadership. Daenerys is a ruler who has always sought to break the chains of oppression. But in doing so, she is discovering that the price of liberation can be more costly than anyone could have imagined. In Meereen, her hold over the city remains tenuous. While she has built a following among the oppressed and conquered, she has also made enemies of those who see her as a threat to their way of life. The ruling class of Meereen does not take kindly to an outsider imposing her will on their city. Daenerys faces the dual challenge of maintaining control of the city while keeping her forces intact in the face of resistance. Despite her dragon's terrifying power, Daenerys is learning that sheer strength may not be enough to keep her enemies at bay. Her reign over Meereen becomes increasingly unstable as the city's politics grow more complex. The people she thought she could trust begin to falter, and even her closest advisors question her decisions. Her growing sense of self-doubt threatens to undermine her resolve, yet she clings to the belief that her destiny lies in Westeros, and her quest for the throne is the only way forward. As her struggle in Meereen unfolds, Daenerys faces new political realities. She has allies who are eager to support her claim, but they have their own interests and demands. She finds herself caught between the ambitions of the leaders of the various cities of Slavers Bay, each with their own agendas, and the need to ensure that her vision of a just and fair rule is realized. The longer she stays in Meereen, the more she is drawn into the web of political intrigue that threatens to distract her from her true goal, reclaiming her birthright in Westeros. Her dragons, too, are growing in strength, and their power is undeniable. But as they grow, so too does the danger they represent. Dragons have always been symbols of destruction and power, and Daenerys must wrestle with the fear that the very creatures she has come to rely on may one day become uncontrollable. The potential for destruction that they represent weighs heavily on her conscience. She knows that to rule effectively, she cannot allow her emotions or her ambition to cloud her judgment. But the dragons are part of who she is, and she is deeply conflicted about the role they will play in her future. Daenerys' struggle in Meereen is symbolic of the greater battle she faces, the need to balance her idealism with the harsh realities of leadership. The dream of liberation, of breaking free from the chains of oppression, is one that is deeply embedded in her character. But as the stakes rise and the cost of her decisions becomes clearer, Daenerys is forced to confront the question of whether the throne she desires is worth the price she must pay. Meanwhile, far to the north, Jon Snow's fate hangs in the balance. Betrayed by those closest to him, he lies bleeding, his life uncertain. The world beyond the wall is growing darker, and the threat of the White Walkers grows more real with each passing day. Jon's death would create a vacuum at the wall, and the struggle for leadership among the Night's Watch would likely become a chaotic power struggle. But even as Jon's fate teeters on the edge of uncertainty, a glimmer of hope remains. Jon Snow's legacy, if he survives, could be one of immense consequence. His leadership has always been about more than just the defense of the wall. It has been about uniting the people of the North, about forging a new understanding between the men of the Night's Watch and the wildlings. Jon's decisions have always been driven by a sense of duty to protect those around him, but his commitment to the greater good has often come at the expense of his personal safety. The betrayal he faced is a stark reminder that loyalty is a fragile thing, especially in a world where power is constantly shifting. Yet Jon's story is far from over. Even as he struggles to survive the wounds inflicted upon him, his connection to the ancient forces of the North becomes increasingly significant. He has always been drawn to the mysteries of the old gods, and his experiences beyond the wall have only deepened his understanding of the forces at play in the world. The question now is whether Jon Snow will emerge from this trial stronger than before, ready to lead once more, or whether his near-death experience will push him into a new, darker role, a leader hardened by the violence and betrayal he has witnessed. The specter of the White Walkers looms larger than ever, and their march southward is unstoppable. Jon Snow's role in the coming battle cannot be understated. He is not just a man caught between politics and survival. He is the key to unlocking the mysteries of the ancient threat that is beginning to engulf the world. As the danger posed by the White Walkers becomes clearer, Jon will have to decide where his loyalties truly lie. Is he the hero the realm needs, or is he a pawn in a much larger game that no one can control? Back in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister's iron grip on the throne grows ever more fragile. The political landscape in Westeros has shifted dramatically, and her position as queen is now threatened by both internal and external forces. Cersei has always been a master of manipulation, but her enemies are closing in, and her options for survival are growing slimmer. As her power wanes, she becomes more desperate, resorting to increasingly ruthless measures to ensure her survival. Cersei's reign has been marked by cruelty, but also by an unshakable determination to maintain her family's legacy. The loss of her children has left her vulnerable, and the desire for revenge has consumed her. Her machinations to eliminate her enemies are becoming more daring, and as she prepares for the coming conflicts, it becomes clear that Cersei will stop at nothing to maintain her power. She is no longer just a queen. She is a woman driven by grief and anger, willing to sacrifice everything to see her family's name live on. The battle for the Iron Throne has always been a brutal one, but it is now more perilous than ever. The forces of darkness are growing stronger, and the battles fought between the living seem almost trivial in comparison to the war that is coming. The realm is on the brink of collapse, and every leader, from Jon Snow in the north to Daenerys Targaryen in the east to Cersei Lannister in the south, must decide where they stand in the face of an enemy unlike any the world has ever seen. The world of Westeros is changing. The old powers are crumbling, and new forces are rising. The fight for the Iron Throne, for control of the realm, may be over before it even begins. The true battle is one for survival, and it will require all of the characters, both heroes and villains, to face the darkness together. Whether they can succeed in this struggle is a question that will define the future of Westeros for generations to come. The complexities of Westeros are rapidly increasing as the larger war that looms ever closer continues to shape the fates of the characters, each one grappling with their personal ambitions and the collective future of the realm. As winter approaches, the threat of the White Walkers, the ultimate force of destruction, becomes even more tangible. The seasons have shifted, and now, as the cold settles into every corner of the land, the stakes have never been higher. The living are divided, but the dead are united in purpose, and the inevitable clash between these two forces of nature will decide the future of Westeros. Jon Snow, whose life was nearly extinguished by betrayal, has been resurrected, though the experience has irrevocably altered him. It is not just his body that has returned to the realm, but something darker, something far more driven by the foreboding knowledge that the coming war may be the end of everything he once fought for. The events leading to his return from the dead have sparked rumors and uncertainty in the minds of those who look to him for leadership. His resurrection has placed him at the center of a larger, more ancient struggle, the fight against the White Walkers, an adversary unlike any of those he faced before. Jon knows that his duty, above all else, is to the survival of humanity. But as he tries to rebuild his relationships with those around him, he begins to realize that his resurrection has set him on a path towards something even grander than he could have imagined, something much more daunting. Though Jon is once again in a position of leadership, he faces an uncertain and divided north. The northern houses, with their ancient bloodlines and storied histories, are not so easily won over. Jon's relationships with the people he once fought alongside are strained as they question his decisions and motives, especially his insistence on aligning with the wildlings. Yet, Jon holds steadfast to his belief that unity is the only hope against the growing threat from the north. While others plot to regain their former power, Jon stands as a symbol of what could be, an enduring leader who values the survival of all, regardless of heritage or background. The weight of his role presses heavily on him, and the mental toll it takes on him is visible in his interactions with those he once trusted, particularly with Sansa Stark, who remains a strong force in the north, but whose methods and philosophy often conflict with Jon's. Sansa's return to Winterfell has been marked by her new, hardened persona. Having endured her own trials in King's Landing and beyond, she has transformed from the naive girl who once dreamed of being a queen into a shrewd and calculating leader. Sansa is no longer content with simply surviving. She is focused on power. Her grasp on Winterfell has solidified, but it comes at the cost of alliances and trust. As Jon and Sansa navigate their leadership in the north, their differing styles create a tension that threatens to divide the Starks once more. Sansa's pragmatic approach to leadership, which sometimes borders on ruthlessness, clashes with Jon's more idealistic vision of unity and peace. The two of them are united in their desire to protect the North, but their approach to achieving that goal is increasingly at odds. Sansa's growing power within Winterfell is not to be underestimated. Yet, it is a fragile power, one that risks alienating allies when cooperation is needed most. While Jon struggles with the political machinations of Winterfell, Daenerys Targaryen's journey continues to unfold far to the east. The Mother of Dragons has long harbored the dream of reclaiming the Iron Throne, but the path to power has not been as straightforward as she once envisioned. Her campaign to conquer the cities of Slaver's Bay is ongoing, but with each victory, new challenges emerge. Daenerys has discovered that even the most well-intentioned ruler must often make compromises, and those compromises can turn allies into enemies. In her efforts to break the chains of oppression, she has also inadvertently bound herself to the very system she despises. She has learned that liberation is not an easy gift to bestow. It is an arduous battle that comes with a cost. Daenerys, however, is undeterred. Her dragons have given her an edge over her enemies, but the more she relies on them, the more she understands the weight of that power. She is becoming a ruler who is more dangerous than ever before, and her growing ambition threatens to cloud her judgment. Her rise to power is juxtaposed by the pressures of ruling, and Daenerys soon finds herself balancing between the ideals of justice and the brutal reality of war. The fact that her dragons are growing larger and more uncontrollable presents new dangers. With each passing day, they become more unpredictable and violent, testing Daenerys' ability to command them. The threat that her own dragons could turn on her, and those she loves, is a growing concern. In this way, Daenerys' relationship with her dragons mirrors the larger themes of power and control that permeate her story. The question remains, will Daenerys be able to maintain control of the very creatures she once saw as symbols of her destiny? Or will they become her undoing? In King's Landing, Cersei Lannister's position as queen is constantly under siege, both from internal enemies and external threats. The political landscape of the capital is shifting as rival factions vie for control, each with their own ambitions and desires. Cersei's grip on power is shaky, but she is not one to relinquish control easily. As the forces of the realm march toward war, Cersei is growing increasingly desperate. The loss of her children and her mounting paranoia have made her ruthless, willing to go to any lengths to protect her remaining power and ensure her family's legacy. Her relationship with her brother Jaime, once the cornerstone of her strength, is becoming strained as the complexity of her reign grows. Jaime, who has long been torn between his loyalty to his family and his own sense of honor, finds himself at a crossroads. The choices he faces are becoming more difficult, and his decisions may have far-reaching consequences for the future of House Lannister. As Cersei schemes to protect her throne, the larger conflict between the living and the dead looms ever closer. The White Walkers, an unstoppable force of nature, continue their march south, unimpeded by the petty politics of the Seven Kingdoms. In this environment, allegiances are shifting, and the realization that the true enemy lies beyond the wall is beginning to dawn on many of the realm's leaders. As the armies of the living prepare to face the White Walkers, the future of Westeros hangs in the balance. Will the petty conflicts of the past prove to be a fatal distraction? Or will the leaders of the Seven Kingdoms be able to set aside their differences and unite in the face of the greater threat? The final pieces of the puzzle are falling into place, but the answers to the most pressing questions remain uncertain. The fight for the Iron Throne is nothing compared to the fight for survival. With winter coming, the stage is set for a battle that will determine the future of Westeros and the world beyond. As the cold wind sweeps across the land, the true nature of power, loyalty, and survival will be revealed. The last war is approaching, and it will test every character, each one struggling with the same question: what is worth fighting for? And in the end, what is worth dying for? As the forces of Westeros move toward an uncertain fate, the political games continue to intensify. The realm is filled with tension. Old wounds reopen, and new alliances form as characters prepare for the inevitable clash that will determine the survival of the living. The far-reaching consequences of these decisions are felt across the Seven Kingdoms, and no one is spared from the personal cost of the coming storm. Whether dealing with their own ambitions or the encroaching threats, every character is forced to confront their own desires, betrayals, and responsibilities. The walls of Westeros are crumbling under the weight of both internal and external pressures, and the landscape has become one where survival itself is the ultimate goal. Jon Snow's role in the North becomes even more complicated as he faces his greatest challenge yet, uniting a fragmented people against an enemy that no one truly believes in. Even after his resurrection, Jon struggles with his place in the world, questioning his very identity. His leadership has always been tested, but now, with the rise of the White Walkers, his task is much larger. Jon's emotional isolation becomes more pronounced as he begins to realize that those he leads may not be as loyal to him as he once thought. The ghosts of his past continue to haunt him as he contemplates the true nature of his purpose. As the Night King's march continues, Jon begins to accept that his fate may not simply be one of leadership. He might have a larger, even more sacrificial role to play. Despite his inner turmoil, Jon remains focused on the looming threat of the White Walkers. His alliance with the wildlings has brought them into the fold of the North, but it has also left him with the delicate task of navigating their integration into the larger northern society. There are those who continue to see them as lesser beings, yet Jon is steadfast in his belief that unity is key to survival. His decisions, such as bringing Tormund Giantsbane and the free folk into Winterfell, are not universally accepted. The Northerners are proud, and many are resentful of Jon's growing alliances with those they once considered enemies. Jon's relationship with Sansa becomes even more strained as the two struggle to find a way to unite the people of the North under one banner. While Jon remains focused on the greater battle beyond their borders, Sansa's more pragmatic approach to leadership contrasts sharply with his idealism. Her political maneuvering becomes sharper as she builds a network of influence within Winterfell, slowly consolidating power for herself and her family. Sansa's transition from a passive figure to a powerful political player is an essential shift in the storyline. Her evolution has been marked by her experiences with Cersei and Littlefinger in King's Landing, which have toughened her resolve and honed her instincts for survival. She no longer views herself as a mere pawn in the games of power. Sansa understands the rules now. The idealistic dream of reunifying the Stark family that Jon once clung to is at odds with her desire for control and security. Sansa is no longer content with simply surviving. She wants to thrive, and that means taking advantage of any opportunity to consolidate power. This dynamic between Jon and Sansa creates a rift in the north, one that could have lasting repercussions as they each struggle for influence in their shared territory. Meanwhile, Daenerys Targaryen's conquest of Slaver's Bay continues, but her efforts to extend her influence are met with increasing challenges. Her dream of liberating the oppressed from the chains of slavery is a noble one, but it comes at a personal cost. Daenerys is becoming increasingly aware of the complex nature of power. As she expands her empire, she faces the realization that it is one thing to liberate the oppressed, but another entirely to govern them. The cities of Slaver's Bay, once the centers of trade and wealth, are now battlegrounds for the loyalty of the people. Daenerys' reputation as a conqueror precedes her, but as she continues her campaign, she starts to feel the weight of her decisions. Her dragons, symbols of her power, are both an advantage and a liability. As they grow, they become harder to control, and Daenerys finds herself confronting not just the enemies outside her walls, but the danger of losing control over the very creatures she has relied on to maintain her dominance. In her dealings with the ruling powers of Slaver's Bay, Daenerys must carefully balance diplomacy, military might, and personal ambition. Her efforts to negotiate with the cities she has conquered are often complicated by betrayal and shifting alliances. She struggles to find allies she can trust and faces a growing paranoia that the people she has freed may not be as loyal as they once seemed. Daenerys has always believed that she was destined for greatness, but the reality of ruling is far more complicated than she anticipated. Her journey has moved beyond the battlefield. It is now a test of her leadership and her ability to make difficult choices. As she contemplates her future, the question of how far she is willing to go to achieve her goals becomes central to her development. The moral dilemmas she faces now will shape not only her own destiny, but the fate of the world around her. In King's Landing, Cersei Lannister's grip on power continues to tighten as she faces increasing pressure from all sides. The political landscape in the capital is in flux as new factions and enemies emerge, each with their own designs on the Iron Throne. Cersei's paranoia has reached new heights, and her every move is calculated with the precision of a seasoned player. But her ability to hold on to power is constantly tested, not only by external forces, but by her own family. Jaime, once her closest ally, begins to question the morality of her actions. His internal conflict grows as he grapples with the choices he has made, and the woman he once adored. Cersei, for her part, becomes more unhinged, determined to do whatever it takes to maintain her position at the top, even if it means sacrificing those closest to her. Jaime's internal struggle is one of the most profound shifts in the storyline. Once seen as the Kingslayer, Jaime has gone through a process of redemption, but his loyalty to his sister continues to bind him. The complexity of their relationship is explored as Jaime is torn between his love for Cersei and his growing realization that her quest for power may destroy everything they've built. The love they share is one of the central, albeit dysfunctional, elements of the Lannister family dynamic. The question of whether Jaime will stand by his sister or break free from her is one that hangs in the balance, and his decisions will have major consequences, not just for Cersei, but for the stability of the realm as a whole. Beyond the capital, the larger battle between the living and the dead continues to unfold. As the White Walkers grow ever closer, those in the south begin to realize that the true enemy is not the one vying for the throne, but the one coming from beyond the wall. The looming threat of the Night King and his army of the dead presents a terrifying reality. The living must choose whether to continue their petty squabbles for power or to unite against the common enemy that threatens to destroy them all. The cold winds of winter blow ever closer, and the question remains, will the people of Westeros recognize the gravity of the situation before it's too late? As alliances shift and the pieces of the puzzle fall into place, the fate of the Seven Kingdoms will be decided not by who sits on the Iron Throne, but by who survives the coming darkness. The stage is set for war, but the struggle in Westeros goes beyond mere battles and political power plays. With each passing day, the forces that threaten the realm grow stronger. Yet, the internal conflicts and personal struggles of the characters reveal just how much of this coming war is also about individuals coming to terms with their past actions and their own futures. Across the Seven Kingdoms, key players wrestle not only with their ambitions, but also with their humanity. The question of whether they will be able to unite for the greater good, or if their personal desires will tear them apart, becomes ever more pressing. In the north, Jon Snow's leadership continues to be tested as the looming threat of the White Walkers becomes ever more immediate. The rising tension between him and Sansa Stark is impossible to ignore. While Jon remains fixated on the war to the north, Sansa's pragmatism increasingly drives her to take a more authoritative approach to the governance of Winterfell. Sansa, who once dreamed of a life of luxury and political maneuvering, has fully embraced her role as a strategist. Her understanding of power dynamics has grown more sophisticated through the lessons of both Cersei Lannister and Littlefinger. Her keen political mind is now focused on ensuring that Winterfell and the North itself survive the coming storm. Her growing resentment of Jon's sometimes naive idealism reaches a tipping point, especially when Jon is reluctant to take the harsh steps needed to consolidate power. Jon, meanwhile, remains focused on his mission to prepare for the coming winter, while his connection to Daenerys Targaryen complicates matters. The threat beyond the wall cannot be ignored, and he must rally the North, the wildlings, and whatever remaining loyal factions still support him in the fight against the Night King. Yet, Jon's leadership is a balancing act, caught between Sansa's political maneuvering and the need for unity in the face of a common enemy. His deepening understanding of the gravity of the situation leads him to make bold choices, like aligning himself with Daenerys Targaryen. However, even his most loyal supporters, such as Davos Seaworth, question whether Jon's blind loyalty to Daenerys might weaken his resolve and risk alienating the people of the North. Jon is forced to come to terms with a growing realization. Leadership is not only about leading men into battle, but also about making tough choices and sacrifices for the greater good. Daenerys Targaryen's quest for the Iron Throne continues to evolve as she grapples with the moral complexity of ruling. She had always believed that she was destined to break the wheel, to liberate the oppressed, and bring justice to a realm full of cruelty and injustice. Yet, as she expands her empire, she comes to realize that there is little glory in ruling over a broken, divided world. Even her victories come at a cost, whether in the destruction of cities or the loss of life among her followers. Her dragons, which were once symbols of her power, begin to feel like chains she cannot escape from. She is no longer the innocent young woman driven by vengeance against those who wronged her family. She is becoming a ruler, one who must weigh every decision carefully. In her interactions with her closest allies, the weight of her choices becomes all too clear. Daenerys is no longer the conqueror she once was. She is a ruler now, and the responsibilities that come with power weigh heavily on her soul. The divide between Daenerys and Tyrion Lannister is one of the most compelling aspects of her leadership. While Tyrion is fiercely loyal to her, his pragmatic, strategic mind increasingly finds himself at odds with Daenerys' passion and unrelenting drive. Tyrion, who has witnessed firsthand the dangers of unchecked ambition, constantly seeks a middle ground where Daenerys can rule with strength, but also with wisdom. However, Daenerys' fierce determination often blinds her to the broader picture. As she pushes for power, her personal sense of justice begins to cloud her judgment. She feels that the Iron Throne is hers by birthright, and she is willing to go to great lengths to claim it. But in her pursuit of that goal, she must grapple with the question, how far is she willing to go to win? On the other side of the political spectrum, Cersei Lannister's hold on power continues to unravel. The death of her children has left her ruthless, paranoid, and increasingly isolated. Her obsession with maintaining control of the Iron Throne consumes her every thought. Cersei's lust for power is so great that she is willing to sacrifice anyone and anything, including her own family, to achieve her goal. Yet, even as she manipulates and schemes, she cannot ignore the shadows looming on the horizon. The White Walkers are coming, and they represent a far greater threat than any rival house. But Cersei's desperation and growing madness blind her to the true danger. She is unwilling to shift her focus away from the throne, even if it means failing to prepare for the battle against the undead. Her relationship with Jaime becomes even more strained. Jaime, once an unflinching ally of his sister, is forced to reckon with the consequences of their actions. His guilt over the violent path they have taken begins to weigh on him. He is no longer the man he once was, bound to Cersei's will without question. The love between them is complex, twisted, and ultimately destructive. Jaime's desire for redemption, for finding a better path, grows stronger, and he begins to question whether he can continue to stand by Cersei. The dynamic between them shifts from one of passionate devotion to one of deep regret and disillusionment. Their bond is being tested, and the consequences of their choices will play out in unpredictable ways. As the battle between the living and the dead draws nearer, the alliances that have been formed throughout Westeros begin to fray. The South, divided between numerous factions, must now confront a reality that cannot be ignored. The White Walkers are coming, and they bring with them a terror unlike anything the world has ever seen. The decision that lies ahead is clear. Will the people of Westeros continue their bitter feuds, or will they join together in the face of this existential threat? For those who still have the will to fight, there are decisions to be made. Should they seek out the most advantageous alliances, or should they focus on the survival of their people first? As the winds of winter continue to blow, the fate of the Seven Kingdoms is increasingly uncertain. Across the seas, the lands Daenerys has conquered continue to grapple with their new reality. Despite her attempts to bring liberation and justice to the oppressed, many of her subjects are questioning whether the cost of freedom is too high. Daenerys must confront the painful truth that no matter how noble her intentions are, the consequences of her actions are far-reaching. With her grip on power beginning to slip, she will be forced to make even more difficult choices that could determine the fate of the world itself. The price of her ambition may turn out to be higher than she ever expected. The tension in Westeros grows, and the reality of impending war becomes increasingly unavoidable. In the north, Jon Snow's leadership faces growing doubts, as he remains deeply torn between his duties as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch and his newfound responsibilities as a Stark, the legitimate heir to Winterfell. Jon's identity crisis is a profound theme in the Winds of Winter. Born as the supposed illegitimate son of Eddard Stark, Jon never truly knew his place in the world, but his recent discovery of his true parentage throws his entire worldview into turmoil. With Daenerys Targaryen's army pushing forward in the south and the White Walkers encroaching ever closer from the north, Jon must reconcile his Stark blood with his role as a leader to face the overwhelming threat ahead. Jon's evolving relationship with Daenerys is central to his internal conflict. There is a sense of kinship between them, both of them being survivors of wars and betrayals. They share the weight of their respective family histories, yet their bonds are complicated by the larger political stakes. Daenerys has her eyes fixed firmly on the Iron Throne, her dream of conquering Westeros ever present in her mind. Meanwhile, Jon, despite his growing feelings for her, is more concerned with the danger the White Walkers pose to the realm. He is an unwilling pawn in the Game of Thrones, a reluctant ruler who knows that uniting the North against the undead is his true duty. Yet, the tension between Jon and Daenerys is more than just a political issue. It's one of trust and leadership. Daenerys, with her dragons and her passionate desire for power, often seems unstoppable. But her idealistic view of justice leads to dangerous consequences. Jon, on the other hand, has always been pragmatic and tempered by a sense of duty to the living, a principle that becomes increasingly difficult to maintain as the battle with the undead grows more imminent. Their growing emotional connection complicates their political dynamics, and Jon is faced with questions that neither of them can avoid. How can he reconcile his loyalty to the North with his growing loyalty to Daenerys? Is it possible for their shared vision to align, or will their individual ambitions drive them apart? As Jon struggles with his internal dilemmas, Sansa Stark's role in the North becomes increasingly pivotal. While Jon is caught up in the larger war, Sansa has focused on the governance of Winterfell, where her own abilities as a leader have blossomed. Sansa's transformation from the naive girl dreaming of courtly life to the shrewd and calculating leader of Winterfell is one of the most compelling arcs in the Winds of Winter. having been shaped by the ruthless lessons taught by Cersei Lannister and Littlefinger. Sansa is now one of the most politically astute characters in Westeros. Her pragmatism is vital in ensuring Winterfell's survival. Yet her relationship with Jon grows strained as she seeks to assert her own authority over him. Sansa's distrust of Daenerys becomes one of the key points of contention between her and Jon. While Jon is driven by a sense of duty to the greater good, Sansa views Daenerys' unrelenting ambition as a potential threat to the north. Sansa believes that Daenerys' goals might lead to the subjugation of Winterfell once again, which brings into question the unity of the north. Sansa's political ambition and her desire for the independence of the north clash with Jon's growing feelings for Daenerys. The two Starks, siblings bound by blood, yet divided by their personal beliefs, struggle to balance loyalty to one another with their respective visions of the future. Meanwhile, Daenerys' own campaign in the south intensifies. Her army continues to march toward King's Landing, and the power struggles that define her journey as a conqueror become more pronounced. At the heart of Daenerys' mission is her unrelenting desire to overthrow Cersei Lannister and claim the Iron Throne, a symbol of ultimate power in Westeros. She knows that her army, bolstered by her dragons, is strong, yet she cannot afford to underestimate the challenges ahead. Her forces may have the advantage in terms of military power, but Cersei's cunning and her ability to manipulate others have served her well thus far. Cersei, who has become increasingly paranoid and isolated, faces pressure on all sides. With the remnants of her family gone and her control over the Iron Throne slipping, Cersei's desperation grows. Her obsession with maintaining her rule has led her to make increasingly erratic decisions, and her ruthlessness knows no bounds. However, Cersei is not without her allies, and the political chessboard is in constant flux. Her capacity to manipulate situations and exploit weaknesses in her enemies will prove to be both a blessing and a curse in the coming battles. Yet, her refusal to acknowledge the growing threat of the White Walkers is one of the most damaging mistakes she makes. Her refusal to form alliances with the other factions could lead to her undoing when the war against the living and the dead truly begins. As the storyline unfolds, the looming presence of the White Walkers is a constant undercurrent that influences all characters, even those far removed from the icy landscapes beyond the wall. The stakes are higher than ever, and the clock is ticking. The Night King and his army march steadily south, leaving nothing but death in their wake. Those in the south, particularly Daenerys and Cersei, still fail to grasp the true scope of the threat. Despite their political maneuvering, they cannot outrun the cold reality of the impending winter. The tension between political ambition and the existential threat posed by the White Walkers becomes a central theme, as characters like Jon Snow and Daenerys must decide whether they will continue their power struggles or prioritize the survival of humanity itself. The consequences of these decisions will echo throughout the realm. No one is safe from the approaching war, and each player must decide how far they are willing to go to secure their future. While Jon and Sansa's leadership in the north focuses on the coming winter and its inevitable clash with the Night King, Daenerys' ambition to rule the Iron Throne risks overshadowing the need for unity in the face of destruction. Cersei's refusal to acknowledge the looming threat is driven by her obsession with maintaining her power at any cost, and her inability to adapt could very well lead to her downfall. The turning point is inevitable, and the choices that these characters make will determine whether Westeros will survive the coming darkness or be consumed by it. As the war drums of Westeros continue to echo louder with each passing day, the characters find themselves at increasingly complex crossroads. Daenerys Targaryen's path to power grows ever more uncertain, and she finds herself confronting the very ideals that have driven her through her conquests. Her initial vision of liberating the oppressed and conquering the Iron Throne now clashes with the pragmatic realities of leadership. The very nature of her rule and her deep-seated belief in destiny become more difficult to reconcile with the harsh truths of governance. She is no longer just a conqueror of cities. She must become a ruler of men, and the weight of that responsibility is something she has not fully understood until now. Daenerys' struggle is also internal. The vision she had of herself as a liberator, one who would be loved by all, begins to fray at the edges. The loyalty of her followers is being tested as her methods of rule become more intense and her actions less predictable. She still has her dragons, the fiercest weapon in the known world, but her once unstoppable momentum now seems fragile. Her approach to power, once driven by an almost childlike belief in her right to rule, now faces the hard edge of reality, with decisions that could either win her the throne or doom her cause. Jon Snow, caught between his duties and his growing emotional connection with Daenerys, stands at a similar crossroads. Having been raised with the values of honor, duty, and sacrifice, Jon finds himself at the heart of a struggle that is no longer about just defeating enemies. It's about saving his people and his home. The weight of leadership, thrust upon him when he least expected it, bears down upon him. Jon is no longer just the bastard son of Ned Stark. He is the true-born son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, a revelation that shakes the very foundations of his understanding of his identity. Jon's identity crisis, however, is not just about the revelation of his bloodline. It is about the responsibility that comes with that lineage. As he tries to navigate his relationship with Daenerys, he is faced with the monumental task of uniting the various factions of Westeros against the threat of the White Walkers. His loyalty to his family, the Starks, and the North is absolute, but his connection with Daenerys complicates everything. He feels torn between the woman he cares for and the realm he is sworn to protect. His instincts tell him that the struggle for the throne must take a backseat to the war against the dead. Yet he must also confront the political realities of his situation. Sansa Stark, ever more astute, sees the changing tides and reacts accordingly. She has grown tremendously from the young girl who once dreamed of courtly life and romance. The harsh realities of Westeros have hardened her, and she now understands the necessity of calculating every move. Sansa recognizes the challenges Jon faces and is increasingly frustrated by his reluctance to see the political power struggles that are playing out around him. She, too, feels the weight of leadership in Winterfell. But unlike Jon, her vision of the North is clearer. It must remain independent at all costs. While Jon seeks unity with Daenerys, Sansa questions the wisdom of putting their trust in a foreign ruler. Her suspicions about Daenerys are not just based on her ambition, but also on the practicalities of the situation. Daenerys may have dragons, but she is still an outsider, and the North will not bend to anyone, not even her. Sansa's perspective provides a critical counterbalance to Jon's idealism. She is aware of the political game being played and does not trust Daenerys to have the North's best interests at heart. While Jon seeks to make alliances, Sansa worries that the North will be betrayed. Sansa's role in this larger scheme cannot be underestimated. She is no longer just the Lady of Winterfell. She is a player in the great Game of Thrones, and she has learned to be ruthless when necessary. She understands the delicate balance between alliances and power, and her pragmatic nature ensures that Winterfell will not fall prey to anyone, least of all Daenerys. Sansa and Jon's relationship begins to fracture under the pressure of their differing visions for the future of the North. Meanwhile, Cersei Lannister's grip on the Iron Throne remains as tenuous as ever. Her paranoia, once a tool of cunning, now threatens to unravel her rule. With her enemies closing in on all sides, Daenerys in the south, Jon in the north, and the White Walkers in the east, Cersei must navigate her precarious position while also dealing with the ghosts of her past. Her once dominant role in the Game of Thrones has been severely weakened, and she finds herself increasingly isolated. The loss of her children and the disintegration of her family's power have left Cersei vulnerable, but she is far from defeated. Her desire for power remains as unyielding as ever, and her willingness to do whatever it takes to maintain her rule will make her a dangerous foe in the coming struggles. Cersei's obsession with her own survival and her refusal to acknowledge the true threat of the White Walkers makes her a deeply flawed leader. While other factions, most notably Jon and Daenerys, are trying to prepare for the battle with the undead, Cersei's focus is entirely on preserving her throne. Her refusal to acknowledge the importance of a united front against the coming darkness makes her an outlier in the struggle for the survival of Westeros. As Cersei pushes her agenda of vengeance and power, she inadvertently positions herself against the very forces that will soon bring about her downfall. In the far north, the threat of the White Walkers looms ever larger, and the battle for survival becomes all-consuming. The Night King continues to march south, leaving destruction in his wake, while the remaining forces of humanity scramble to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Jon Snow, Sansa Stark, and the Northern Lords have begun to rally their forces, but they know that they cannot face the Night King alone. The South, which remains oblivious to the true threat, will eventually have to choose between power and survival. Jon and Daenerys' relationship grows more strained as the political and emotional tensions between them intensify. The battle against the living and the dead looms ever closer, and the question remains, can they unite against the greater threat? Or will their personal ambitions and fears tear them apart? The fate of Westeros, and perhaps all of humanity, rests on the choices they make. As the story in the Winds of Winter continues to unfold, the chessboard of Westeros grows increasingly complex, with each player carving out their position with varying degrees of success and failure. In the midst of the looming threat of the White Walkers, political maneuvering reaches a fever pitch, and alliances, fragile as they are, begin to show signs of strain and fracture. At the heart of this chaos are the characters, whose personal struggles and ambitions threaten to either unite or destroy the realms they seek to govern. Jon Snow finds himself torn between two opposing forces, each representing a different vision for the future of Westeros. As Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Jon is more aware than most of the dire threat posed by the White Walkers. But his position also places him in the delicate web of political alliances that span the continent. His loyalty to his Stark family, especially Sansa, has driven him to ensure the North's survival. But Jon's responsibilities extend far beyond his home. He must balance his role as a leader in the North with the urgent necessity of confronting the growing undead threat in the East. Jon's true parentage, now revealed to him as the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, complicates his political position further. Though Jon's personal identity is important to him, it is the fate of the realm that dominates his thoughts. Daenerys Targaryen, on the other hand, is faced with the consequences of her unrelenting quest for the Iron Throne. Her army and her dragons have brought her to the gates of Westeros. But as she steps closer to claiming her birthright, the harsh realities of leadership begin to weigh on her. The idealized vision she had of herself as a liberator has slowly given way to the practicalities of ruling. Her temper, once seen as a mark of strength, now threatens to turn against her as she becomes more isolated. The very people who once rallied to her cause begin to question her methods, her intentions, and the cost of her ambitions. Daenerys, however, is steadfast, unable or unwilling to acknowledge the dangers of her increasingly authoritarian leadership style. Her dragons remain her greatest weapon, but they too come with their own burdens. The dragons, symbols of her power, are a reminder that the path she has chosen is one filled with destruction and bloodshed. Despite the costs, Daenerys remains determined to seize the throne, no matter the sacrifices required. The tension between Jon and Daenerys reaches a boiling point as the reality of their respective goals clashes. While Jon, though driven by honor, is primarily concerned with the defense of humanity against the White Walkers, Daenerys is unwilling to place her personal ambitions on hold. Jon's desire for unity, particularly with Daenerys, is constantly thwarted by the growing divide between their priorities. Jon feels increasingly alienated from Daenerys, especially as her hunger for power blinds her to the looming existential threat of the White Walkers. Though he once viewed Daenerys as a potential ally and a powerful force for good, he now begins to see her more as a potential tyrant, blinded by her obsession with the throne. Meanwhile, Sansa Stark's growing political acumen becomes even more evident as she takes on a stronger role in Winterfell. Unlike Jon, who struggles with the practical demands of leadership, Sansa embraces the role of a ruler. Her experiences in King's Landing and with the various factions of Westeros have given her a keen understanding of the dangers of power and how to manipulate it to her advantage. She knows that in order to protect the North, she must be willing to make difficult decisions, even if they alienate those closest to her. The North's survival, Sansa believes, is paramount, and she does not trust Daenerys to be the ruler they need. Sansa's skepticism about Daenerys' claim to the throne becomes a focal point for the tensions that arise between her and Jon. Sansa does not believe that Daenerys can be trusted, and she is willing to take drastic action to ensure that the North remains independent and safe. While Jon and Daenerys are locked in a political and emotional struggle, Cersei Lannister's attempts to hold on to the Iron Throne grow increasingly desperate. The Queen's position has never been as precarious as it is now, with multiple enemies closing in from all sides. She has alienated many of her allies, and her hold on power weakens with each passing day. Despite her apparent ruthlessness, Cersei's obsession with survival is becoming a significant weakness. Her desire to rule by fear and manipulation has pushed her further into isolation, and her refusal to acknowledge the greater threat of the White Walkers continues to undermine her leadership. Cersei's short-sightedness and refusal to ally with the other factions only increase the likelihood of her eventual downfall. She is becoming more erratic, and her once ironclad hold on the throne seems to be slipping through her fingers. The looming battle against the White Walkers continues to escalate as the dead advance, inexorably moving southward toward the living. The North, with its formidable defenses and its determined people, has rallied under Jon's leadership. But it is clear that the fight against the White Walkers will require more than just the strength of the North. The growing tension between Jon and Daenerys, the political maneuvers of Sansa, and Cersei's refusal to acknowledge the threat all leave the realm divided when it needs unity the most. The struggle for the throne may seem paramount to those at the heart of Westeros politics, but it is becoming increasingly clear that the greatest enemy is not a rival claimant, but the army of the dead. The final stages of the novel see the characters coming to terms with the reality that, regardless of their political ambitions, survival will require unprecedented cooperation. Jon, Sansa, and Daenerys may find themselves forced to put aside their differences, though the personal costs will be great. As the Night King's army continues its march, the looming clash with the dead becomes inevitable. The alliances formed in these moments of greatest peril will determine not just who will sit on the Iron Throne, but whether Westeros itself will survive to see another day. The stakes have never been higher, and the choices made by each character will have lasting consequences, not just for themselves, but for the entire realm. As the world of Westeros edges closer to its moment of reckoning, the final chapters of The Winds of Winter lay bare the ultimate challenges facing its key players. The realm, divided by a patchwork of loyalties, has become a battleground not only of political ambitions, but of survival itself. The true enemy is no longer just a matter of thrones or power, at least not in the traditional sense, but the very existence of humanity. The threat of the White Walkers looms like a shadow, ready to engulf everything in its path. What has been at stake all along, the Iron Throne, now seems like a mere trinket in comparison to the fight for survival against a terrifying, relentless force that knows no boundaries. Jon Snow, the reluctant leader, stands at a crossroads. His awareness of the threat posed by the White Walkers has made him an early advocate for unity. Yet his efforts to bridge the divides between factions have only exacerbated the tensions. The discovery of Jon's true parentage, the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, has added a layer of complexity to his role. This revelation has made him a potential claimant to the Iron Throne, a fact that complicates his already strained relationship with Daenerys. Though Jon has always struggled with his own identity, and role within the larger political landscape. His understanding of the immediate danger forces him to focus on the common enemy. His resolve to unite the disparate factions of Westeros remains steadfast, even though his pursuit of cooperation may come at the cost of his own personal desires and allegiances. Jon's relationship with Daenerys becomes ever more strained as they inch closer to a direct confrontation. Daenerys, determined to reclaim the Iron Throne that she believes is rightfully hers, begins to grow increasingly erratic in her approach to leadership. While she has made significant strides in gathering an army and securing powerful alliances, her growing obsession with the throne clouds her judgment. The harsh realities of war, especially when dealing with the White Walkers, bring out a darker side of Daenerys. As the stakes grow higher, her need for control grows stronger, and her disregard for the fragile alliances she has formed becomes more pronounced. The once visionary leader is now perceived by some as an authoritarian, and her ruthless tactics, while sometimes effective, have begun to alienate those closest to her. For Jon, his struggle with Daenerys is not just political, but deeply personal. He once admired her strength, her idealism, and her belief in justice. But as time has worn on, he sees her vision for the future as increasingly incompatible with the collective need of the realm. His desire to save Westeros from the dead is overshadowed by his growing fear that Daenerys may lead them down a path that only leads to more destruction. Jon's loyalty to the North and his commitment to ensuring its survival above all else drives him to reconsider his allegiance. Though Jon's bond with Daenerys is strong, both on a personal and political level, it is clear that their goals have become incompatible. The two are now locked in a struggle that will determine not just the fate of the North, but the fate of the entire realm. As the tension between Jon and Daenerys escalates, the story shifts its focus to Sansa Stark. The sharp-eyed, politically astute leader of Winterfell has become one of the most formidable figures in the fight for survival. No longer the naive girl who once relied on others, Sansa has grown into a woman who understands the delicate balance of power in Westeros. Her experiences, from her time in King's Landing to her leadership of Winterfell, have equipped her with the tools to navigate the treacherous political landscape. Yet, despite her impressive abilities as a ruler, Sansa is no longer content to be a mere player in the game. She understands that her primary loyalty lies with the North, and it is to the North that she will devote her efforts, regardless of who sits on the Iron Throne. Sansa's relationship with Jon is now a source of tension. Though she loves her brother, she is not willing to blindly follow him, especially when it comes to matters as crucial as the survival of the North. She views Daenerys with growing suspicion and believes that her claim to the throne is just as dangerous as the ones held by Cersei or any other would-be rulers of Westeros. Sansa's determination to protect the North has led her to the conclusion that the North must remain independent, even if that means breaking away from the rest of the realm. Her pragmatism, while sometimes harsh, is rooted in the belief that survival depends on securing a future free from the entanglements of Southern politics. Cersei Lannister's position as the Queen of Westeros becomes increasingly precarious as the novel progresses. While she remains as ruthless and cunning as ever, her grip on power is slipping. Her actions have alienated many of her allies, and her refusal to acknowledge the growing threat of the White Walkers makes her a pariah in a world that can no longer afford to ignore the undead army advancing from the north. Her obsession with her children and her desire to maintain control over the Iron Throne has blinded her to the reality of the world around her. Her rejection of potential alliances, especially with those who might help in the fight against the White Walkers, only hastens her decline. Though Cersei remains a formidable adversary, her refusal to adapt to the changing circumstances is a fatal flaw, one that could ultimately lead to her downfall. The White Walkers, meanwhile, continue their relentless march southward. Their army of the dead grows ever larger, a monstrous force that seems unstoppable. For all the political maneuvering and personal struggles that unfold across Westeros, the true threat remains the dead, an existential danger that will not stop until every living being is eradicated. The realization that survival is the only true goal brings many of the factions together, even as they continue to grapple with their differences. Jon Snow, Sansa Stark, Daenerys Targaryen, and even Cersei Lannister are now forced to face the reality that their ambitions, their feuds, and their thirst for power mean little in the face of the coming apocalypse. In the end, the ultimate question remains: will the people of Westeros be able to put aside their differences and unite in the face of a common enemy? Or will they continue to fight each other, oblivious to the true danger that looms? As alliances shift and characters grapple with their own personal desires and larger responsibilities, the future of the realm grows more uncertain. The decisions made in these final moments will shape the fate of Westeros for generations to come. The battle for the Iron Throne may be momentarily eclipsed by the more immediate struggle for survival. But the choices made in the heat of this final conflict will ultimately determine whether Westeros will remain standing or fall to the dead. The story ends on a note of unresolved tension, a reminder that while the Game of Thrones may end, the fight for life and death is one that has no true victor. The tale spun across the pages of The Winds of Winter is not just another chapter in the ongoing saga of Westeros. It is a reckoning. In this sprawling, intricate web of ambition, betrayal, legacy, and survival, George R. Martin challenges every expectation of what it means to win or lose the Game of Thrones. With the icy march of death creeping down from the north and fire blazing its path across the south, the sixth book in A Song of Ice and Fire brings readers to the brink of an apocalypse that renders crowns meaningless and bloodlines irrelevant. The story evolves from a brutal political chess match into a profound meditation on humanity's ability or failure to unite in the face of extinction. Martin masterfully deepens the arcs of his core characters. Jon Snow grapples with the dual burden of heritage and leadership, torn between blood and belief. Daenerys Targaryen burns with purpose, but the fire that once symbolized justice now threatens to consume everything around her. Sansa Stark, shaped by cruelty and sharpened by experience, rises as a force of cool-headed realism. Even the villains, like Cersei Lannister, are presented not as caricatures of evil, but as human beings trapped by fear, ego, and memory. Every choice they make ripples outward, colliding with fate and forging the uncertain road to to the story's long-awaited end. But beyond characters and kingdoms, The Winds of Winter holds a mirror to the real world. It explores the fragility of alliances, the seduction of power, and the terrifying speed at which humanity turns on itself in moments of desperation. It asks difficult questions about who deserves to lead, what justice really looks like, and whether it is possible to break the cycles of violence and vengeance that have defined generations. Though the book remains unfinished in its final destination, it is rich in momentum. The coming of winter is no longer a metaphor, but a reality. It brings with it not only cold and darkness, but truth about identity, loyalty, and the limits of control. And in that truth lies the final challenge. Will those still standing choose life over pride, mercy over conquest, unity over ruin? Martin does not offer simple resolutions. Instead, he presents a canvas smeared with blood, snow, and smoke, inviting us to contemplate what kind of world will rise when the storm passes. Whether that world will be better or simply different remains the question that a dream of spring may one day answer. Until then, The Winds of Winter reminds us that in the great Game of Thrones, survival is not guaranteed. Loyalty is never pure, and even heroes must walk through fire and ice before they find their fate.